is. So Kentucky has a problem with democracy. 13% of Kentuckians voted in the primary 2015, and now they're predicting single digits are going to vote in Kentucky. So the U.S. government's going to invade Venezuela because their democracy is shitty. Meanwhile, only 9% of Kentuckians are supposed to just do a quick side-by-side comparison between Colorado, the state I live in now for the past 3 years, and Kentucky, the state I lived in for over 3 decades. Kentucky just has no democracy, and Colorado has a shit ton of democracy. Colorado just has so much democracy, you probably get sick of it, right? It's like, God, 10 questions, can't they figure shit out for themselves? So Kentucky, on the other hand, they only vote on one day, one opportunity, one moment, right? Can you do it? On election day, it's not a holiday, it's on a Tuesday, a work day, so 9 to 5. So for some odd reason, you have this electoral reform package being unveiled by both Adam Edelin and Andy Beshear. Which one put it out first? May 13th, 2019 on Twitter is when Andy Beshear unveiled his electoral reform package. But I also saw Adam Edelin also put out his electoral reform package. So who beat who first? And, you know, neither one of them really had any novel ideas. They were interesting ideas. They would help, but overall they fall flat. So let's talk about Adam Edelin and Andy Beshear's electoral reform. And then I have 10 suggestions and then some comments, compare and contrast between the democracy of Colorado versus the democracy of Kentucky. Okay, so Adam Edelin was the first one that I saw on Facebook, and then I, searched hashtag KYGOV on both Twitter and Facebook, and I found Andy Beshear's, which was released in a meme, and it just had, 5 bullet points. So Adam Edelin, he wanted automatic voter registration. He also wanted, to get this in, Adam Edelin was for automatic voter registration, 2 weeks of early voting, written ballots for anybody who asked for one, and then voting convenience centers for the 2 weeks of voting. So voting convenience centers, they should be convenience centers anyways for the 2 weeks of early voting. I think that's good. It only extends it 2 weeks. Colorado has 1 month, 30 days to go vote. So 2 weeks of early voting, written ballots for anybody who asks for one. So you have to request it, and you have to know what the hell is going on to be able to request it. And then also automatic voter registration, which all the Secretary of State candidates were in favor of. Automatic voter registration, so when you get your driver's license, you can get automatically registered to vote. I believe that's already the goddamn fucking law anyway, so I believe that's already there. So automatic voter registration. I mean, do they use birth certificate or Social Security? I think it's going to be the driver's license, and they ask you if you want to vote whenever you get your driver's license. So I don't understand this reform. It's, good. It sounds nice. Now, Andy Beshear. The 5 ideas of Andy Beshear is, number 1, automatic voter registration. Oh, where did I hear that from? So both the candidates want automatic voter registration. Number 2, early voting and flexible absentee voting. Early voting and flexible absentee voting. So early voting, he said 2 weeks early voting. He's calling for just, flat early voting. Also, polls stay open longer. It'll help a little bit. So what, till 8 p.m.? I don't know. People like to go to bed pretty early, so 6 p.m. is the cutoff date. But since 9 to 5, why not make it a goddamn holiday? Make it a fucking holiday so they have all day to go. Instead of extending the hours so everybody has to work long-ass hours, that would be better than not making it, the election day a federal or a national or a state holiday, which you would get paid for. So extending the polls would help a little because 9 to 5 workers only have 1 hour to make it to the 6 p.m. deadline, so that gives them 3 hours. So that should get them plenty of time. But some people, commute 1 to 2, 3 hours, especially if you're in a poor area. And it's only, Another idea that was unanimously supported by all the Democrat candidates for Secretary of State, restoring nonviolent felon voting rights. So you've done your time. You deserve to get your voting rights restored. That's agreed upon. Steve Beshear, actually the governor before Matt Bevin, had signed an executive order restoring those rights. Matt Bevin immediately took them away as soon as he came in. So Andy Beshear is for the registration fees for super PACs. That's the only interesting one that was like, oh, that's interesting. The other, there was none that was really interesting for Adam Edelin. The written ballots, okay, so yeah, it's a little bit, there's a paper trail. Voting convenience centers, it should all be convenient. Why you're calling it something different? 2 weeks of early voting, okay. Automatic voter registration, I think we already got it. So they were, four boring-ass ideas. It would barely help anybody, but not really help anyone. So Kentucky is so far behind, and I'll get to that in a second. So for Andy Beshear, I at least like his registration fees for super PACs. That's a way to get big money, or at least tax big money. You're going to put big money into Kentucky. The only thing that looks like that's different between Andy Beshear and Adam Edelin is that Andy Beshear is calling for these registration fees for super PACs and for the polls to stay open a few more hours. But that's it. I mean, they have identical, these electoral reform packages. Did they cheat off of each other? Did they just steal each other's ideas? So Kentucky has a problem with democracy. 13% of Kentuckians voted in the primary 2015, and now they're predicting single digits are going to vote in Kentucky. So the U.S. government's going to invade Venezuela because their democracy is shitty. Meanwhile, only 9% of Kentuckians are supposed to vote come Tuesday, next Tuesday, May 21st, 2015. And they all had an opinion about, the disqualification of the Kentucky Derby, but they don't even know that the governor's race is going on, and the Democratic race is actually pretty exciting. I would say it's all four candidates. The Democratic race is very, very exciting. So you have, it's a primary, right? So perhaps it's not that important. What is Kentucky voting on? Oh, just the leadership, just the governor, just the entire executive branch, the auditor, the treasurer, the secretary. Yeah, it's not a tiny little race. This is the most important election right before the general election. So this is the most, every 4 years you're going to vote for governor in the direction that Kentucky's going to go in. So you got the chief magistrate of the executive branch, governor, auditor, secretary of state, treasurer, agricultural commissioner, and the attorney general. So these are 6 major positions, plus the lieutenant governor, but that's sort of with the governor's race. So that's 6 major positions that is up for grabs right now. Right now, we don't have a Secretary of State. She's term limited, so it's an open seat. And I bet a lot of these are open seats. How did Mike Harmon do as auditor and the treasurer? They didn't solve all that pension shit, did they? So what the fuck was the auditor and treasurer doing? Shouldn't they have figured the money situation out by now? So not giving a damn who leads Kentucky. You can't say you love Kentucky if you don't give a damn about who's leading Kentucky. So 9% is going to vote in the primary, so that means 90%, over 90% of Kentuckians don't give a shit about who leads their state. That's a failed democracy. That's a broken democracy. That's a government that is not being ran of, by, and for the people. That is not an effective, legitimate democracy. Just do a quick side-by-side comparison between Colorado, the state I live in now for the past 3 years, and Kentucky, the state I lived in for over 3 decades. Kentucky just has no democracy, and Colorado has a shit ton of democracy. So 9% turnout rate for the primaries, 13% last year, or last 4 years. It is so bad in Kentucky. They have none of the things that Colorado have. They don't have referendum initiative recall. They don't have open primaries. They don't have written ballots. They don't have 30 days of electioning. You get your written ballot, and then for 30 days you get to ponder, and you get to think, and you get to research, and then figure out who does what where do you support. Then once you figure out what you like and who you like, you fill in the bubble, and then you go from there. Same-day registration. So if you just move into Colorado but you're here permanently, you can register on the same day. So you don't have to worry about, did you register here or there? I once heard that 18-year-olds move 6 times before they're 30 years old. Then there's also the initiatives, right? I mentioned Those initiatives are huge. Those initiatives mean that I have had 10 different questions, at least a dozen questions every year I've been here. So I've answered 30 different questions, public policy questions that we, the people, collectively decided. I voted against the jail in Pueblo. I voted in favor of the Kevorkian law. I remember looking at and reporting about the open primaries. But I've been saying something about every time. So I've, put out my issue statements for each one of those elections. Now, I've had more questions asked to me within 1 year in Colorado than what I had my entire life in Kentucky. In 2004, they said, do you want gay marriage to be legal? And I don't know what I answered, but I know that Kentucky voted against gay marriage. So this was unanimous. The only issue was, hey, do you want to discriminate against the gays? And Kentucky was like, yeah. And then we never had another question after that. I heard that they just passed Marcy's law last year. So the Kentucky people passed this Marcy law. They actually had a question, but it's being litigated in court right now. So even when the people get what they want, they got the question, they approved of the Colorado just has so much democracy. You probably get sick of it, right? It's like, God, 10 questions. Can't they figure shit out for themselves? So Kentucky, on the other hand, they only vote on one day, one opportunity, one moment, right? Can you do it? On election day, it's not a holiday. It's on a Tuesday, a work day. So 9 to 5 p.m. workers only have a 4-hour window of opportunity, 3 hours prior, 1 hour afterwards. So, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Kentuckians are expected to vote within that 4-hour window for the candidates that they have researched and support. With all the independent research they were able to conduct on the weekends and at nights during their free time, and combined with the media's coverage, their pathetic coverage of the primaries. So, and then what if there's a long line, and then what if there's car problems? Talk about dissuading Kentuckians from voting. So instead of having 30 days to figure out something that's written, you have a paper trail, and then it's also Diebold machines, so there are no paper trail. Diebold machines can be hacked into within 3 minutes. So what happens if there's corruption? What happens if it got hacked into? How can you find out who voted for who? You just have to redo the whole. Kentucky is so far behind Colorado. Kentucky needs a huge, massive, ambitious electoral reform package. So here's my 10 suggestions. Number 1, find everybody who doesn't vote $1,000. Just like in Australia, if you don't vote, this is a democracy. This is what, people fought and died for. This is a constitutional republic. Don't you want to fight for this thing? So at the very least, that's the only power you got if you're not even using that political power. Are you watching your politicians and you're watching the bills and you're following the laws? You're not doing any of that. Are you calling hey, why did you vote for that? You're not doing any of that. You're not even fucking voting. So the $1,000 fine might actually get to inspire people to say, hey, I'm allowed to vote if I want to. I'm allowed to not vote. That's my right as an American to not to vote. And I'm actually partial to that opinion. So if passing a $1,000 fine gets people up, rising, and then they're putting pressure on their politicians, guess what? Well, I just made democracy work. So that's at the very least. At the very most, if everybody's voting, then everybody's paying attention to it, and more people are paying attention to it, democracy is just going to flourish. Because 9% is embarrassing. That means there's no democratic legitimacy, and then those assholes will pretend they got the mandate of the majority of the people. Well, 5% of the 9% voted for me, so I'm in charge of 100%. Jesus Christ. And how can any thinking person be like, that's fun. That's cool. $1,000 fine. So the way it happens in Australia, essentially you have a 90% turnout rate, so everybody's voting, but the 10% that don't vote, they don't really enforce the $1,000 fine. It's more symbolic. But again, if people want to protest it, good. That's activating them politically. And if they say, well, we probably should go vote, we don't want that damn fine, and why haven't we been voting anyways? Well, now we're having a different conversation. So because Kentucky is so far behind, you've got to have a rigorous, ambitious, and, incredible. You can't just say, oh, we're going to extend Election Day for another hour. No, you're going to turn Election Day into a holiday. You're going to introduce instant runoff voting. You're going to have public financed elections, referendum, initiative, recall, lower the age requirements for the positions. You can have electoral reform where you just fix the election laws, but when you start, getting into the election laws, you're going to get into the Constitution. So Kentucky's Constitution is, since 1891, so they've been needing a new Constitution for what, over 100 years now? Tax and super PACs, I adopted that too, so I like Andy Beshear's electoral reform a little bit better because he actually had a novel idea, tax and super PACs, or the registration fees, which is, a tax anyways. Colorado has same-day registration, so Kentucky needs that. The 30 days of electioning, so have written ballots sent out to everybody 30 days prior to the election. Get rid of those electronic machines. Just have written ballots. It works. It's successful. There's a paper trail. Everybody's assigned their own ballot, and, everybody gets sent their ballot 30 days before the election day, and you can request it if there's, issues or problems. But it works. It works. It's been working, and it works really well here. Lower age requirements, so for city council magistrates, you have to be 24 years old. Allow 18-year-olds to. You're cognizant and the people vote for you. If you're 18 and the people vote for you, if the people vote for a rock, if the people vote for a dog, if the people vote for, the sunshine to rule over them, then that is what the people want. If they want an 18-year-old to rule over them, if they want a 30-year-old, if they want a 90-year-old, it's what the people want. So to have age requirements, I can understand residency requirements, but the age requirements they're way too high. They're way too high. They allow only 24 years, so that means for 6 years, right? You already went to the war and you fought, you went to college and you did this and that. 24? No. Let people at 18, get their feet wet when it comes to the political shit show. So instant runoff voting is how you make the election fair. Right now I would vote for Jeff Young, number 1, Adam Edelin, number 2, Andy Beshear, number 3, and Rocky Atkins, number 4. Rocky is the most Republican out of all these three, so who do you think Kentucky's going to vote for? Republican Democrat or a Republican Republican? They'll vote for the Republican Republican, just like they did in 2015. Conway was a Republican Democrat. Did that work in 2015? Having instant runoff voting, you actually have a better, fair system than Colorado. If Kentucky was to adopt instant runoff voting, a.k.a. preferential voting, a.k.a. ranked choice voting, they would have a more progressive election than Colorado does. This is because I could vote for my Jeff Young, as number 1. Now, who's going to be my number 2 vote? Jeff Young, I feel good about. He's very progressive. He's the most progressive, so I feel good. I'm endorsing him. I like him. He would do a great job. Now, who would be my number 2? Adam Edelin. So what does that mean? If you're Adam Edelin and we have ranked choice voting, now you got to be nice to me. I'm going to vote for Jeff Young, but if you want me to vote my number 2 vote, let's assume Jeff Young loses. So I didn't waste my vote. The spoiler effect is gone. My second vote, because it's an instant runoff, so this is not pretending, but it's an algorithm which essentially works the same as if you had one election and then you eliminated the bottom and then you had another election. And so you could have many runoff elections all in one instant, which is why it's called instant runoff. On and so forth. Eventually you have just 2 candidates and then one of them is going to get the majority. So if you're Andy Beshear, you'd want to get my number 3 vote, and if you're Rocky, you don't want my last place vote, right? So number 1 would be Jeff Young. And since I'm voting for Jeff Young, if you're Edelin, Beshear, or Atkins, you got to win me over by talking about the same issues that Jeff Young is talking about. If I only know that one of them is going to support the unions and single-payer health care and legalizing marijuana, then why would I go anywhere else? But if Adam Edelin started talking to my progressive views, and he specifically, this makes people be nicer. So instead of just saying, fuck you, Jeff Young, and fuck everyone who supports him, and just treat him like dog shit, now you actually got to be nice. So this is cordial. This instant runoff voting makes the election cordial. And then the strategy and the tactic is you just have to appeal to everybody. If you're Adam Edelin, you're going to win over Andy Beshears and Rocky Atkins and Jeff Young voters, plus, all the unregistered and all the people that haven't, picked a person. You got to go again for every group, every person out there. You have to have far, wide, and deep support to Kentucky elections. Now you got 9%. That's going to come out and vote. 9%. So who's the 5% of the 9% going to vote for? Well, I got 5% of the 9%. I get to run all of Kentucky now. I got 5% of the 9%. You have instant runoff voting. You have your vote will matter. Your vote will count. You won't have the spoiler effect, so you can't say, oh, you wasted your vote for Nader. No, I didn't. My number 2 vote. So you can't waste your vote. And you have deep, wide, and far support. So, again, you have to win over everybody's voters if you want to win. So you have deep, far, and wide support. So it means you are the majority winner. You have the most popular support out of everybody. And you don't win until you get a majority. So anybody that says otherwise is a fucking liar. Is a goddamn motherfucking liar. Like that fucking prick in Pueblo. Whatever his name is. So, public finance elections. This is something that Adam and Edelin and Andy Beshear won't do. They will not do public finance election because they're discriminating against Jeff Young right now. Public finance referendum initiative and recall, if all 5 million Kentuckians signed the petition, and they wanted, let's just say, they wanted to make alcohol illegal. So all 5 million Kentuckians sign a petition. It wouldn't go on the ballot because it has to go through the legislature. And then the legislature only has 20 or so that they're allowed to choose from. So this is crazy. This is insane. Why do I support referendum initiative and recall? Because I support democracy. All power to the people. If the people get enough votes, they could put an issue on the ballot themselves, and then they could vote on that issue themselves. That's the power of democracy. If you have somebody that is in office and they fuck up really bad, say, they drown a baby in a bathtub or some shit, then you can recall that piece of shit. You get a bunch of signatures, you get it, on a petition, you turn that petition in, and then there's another election that's held, a special election, and you also have to have the name of the successor, too. So once you, want to throw the bastard out, you can have a recall election. All power to the people. The right to initiative is an inviolate right. It has been with the state of Colorado for quite some time. Referendum, initiative, recall. So the power to the people. The people can get a bunch of signatures, put it on the ballot, and then they can vote on that issue. And the powers that be can't do shit about it. They could try to say invalidate it here and there, but if you, follow the law, cross your T's, dot your I's, do everything on the up and up, make sure it's all, prim and proper and perfect. Any and every initiative. So think of a question that you would want, hey, do you want instant runoff voting? Hey, do you want same-day registration? Hey, do you want a $1,000 fine for those who don't vote? Hey, you want a constitutional convention? So those are the 10 ideas that Kentucky needs. You need an ambitious plan. You need not just one little thing. You don't just need, 2 more hours, right? 3 more hours on top of that's not going to help the voter turnout rate. Here's another idea, and I really love this idea. It depends on how much everything costs. But what about one person winning $1 million? If you're trying to encourage the people to come out, whoever, is the 1 millionth voter gets $1 million. I bet you that would increase